Back in Jesus' time, there must have been a lot of storms.
All four Gospels record at least one storm story that affects the disciples.
Well, 3 of them mention a word storm. John just mentions a gale and a rough sea whilst the disciples are in a boat.
Just
a gale in a rough sea?
That sounds like a storm to me.
I wouldn't like to be in a boat with a gale in a rough sea.
Me either. And yet, in one of the stories that Matthew, Mark and Luke recorded, Jesus just stays fast asleep in the storm.
That's crazy. How can anyone sleep in a storm?
Well, Luke 8 tells us,
One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and started out. As soon as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water and they were in real danger. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and raging waves. Suddenly the storm stopped and all was calm. Then he asked them, "Where is your faith?" The disciples were terrified and amazed. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "When he gives a command, even the wind and waves obey him."
Matthew 8 and Mark 4 pretty much tells us the same story, but then Matthew, Mark and John tells us another story about a storm.
Another storm?
Yes, but this time Jesus isn't asleep. In fact, he isn't even with them.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Mark 6 tells us,
Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and head across to the lake to Bethsaida while he sent the people home. After telling everyone goodbye, he went up into the hills by himself to pray.
Late that night, the disciples were in their boat in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on the land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and waves. About 3:00 in the morning, Jesus came towards them, walking on the water. He intended to go past them, but when they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. They were all terrified when they saw him.
But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." Then he climbed into the boat and the wind stopped. They were totally amazed.
Wow, so this time Jesus walks to them across water, whilst there is a gale blowing and a rough sea.
yes.
I couldn't do that.
Me either. But Matthew tells us a bit more because not only did Jesus walk on water, but Peter did too. Matthew 14 says,
Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said.
So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted.
Jesus immediately reached out to grab him. You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why do you doubt me?"
That's incredible. So Matthew tells us that Peter walked across water too.
Yes, but only when he kept his eyes on Jesus. When he was distracted by the waves and the storm, he began to sink.
in these stories we can see storms happen. Jesus doesn't prevent them, nor does he necessarily stop them straight away. But the storms are not more powerful than Jesus, and when the disciples look for Jesus in their safety and protection, he safely brings them through the storm.